have uniforms, and it could be a uniform of a worker, a uniform of a professor. And Milgram's experiment, remember, was exactly that. Someone wearing a white coat calling themselves a professor um, instilled so much behavioral compliance that subjects were willing to administer lethal electric shocks during the experiment to
That's right.
people.
But it does, but what we're talking about is also it does impact your own behavior as well, because you've actually fit into that role. I mean, when I'm in a suit, I'm far, I almost feel I'm far more articulate or far more, um, you behave more intelligently. I mean, there's certain colors and things like this, when you go into color psychology that does that as well.
But that's the power of expectation. You see, remember what we said, that people rarely get what they deserve, but they almost always get what they expect. And that's why your past is so incredibly important for you in terms of determining your future, because you base your expectations on your previous experiences. And what's crucial, and what I tell patients is that we need to reprocess previous psychological blocks, even minor traumas, because it massively affects how they go on in their lives. And interestingly, there's a Professor Pennybecker, who is frequently quoted by Jordan Peterson. And what he discovered was getting people to write about their lives and their past would increase their mental and physical health. And if you did it in students, it would actually increase their exam performance, simply getting them to write about their pasts, writing it down.
Just tell me, while we're on this sort of topic, I wanted to go sort of slightly back to what you were talking about when people actually have their identity stripped from them. How does something like that actually happen?
Lose their job. That's it.
Okay, so
lose their job, be struck off. If you're a doctor or as a solicitor, losing your core identity it is the most catastrophic thing that anyone can have, and it's because it's how you define someone. And even if you look through the pages of history and old ancient text, people are defined often not by their names, but who they are a son of or a daughter of, or what their profession is.
Right, because sorry, I've lost my trail of thought. Because actually, it comes down to one of the core human needs, which is significance. Once you've taken someone's significance away from them, they become a sort of a very shallow version of themselves, and they'll go down this downhill spiral, and basically that's what people actually fall into depression and things like this, and if that happens, and if it's happening particularly during this lockdown for some people,
significance is important, but it's this is even more fundamental than that. Your identity is your knowledge of how to deal with yourself within the world, and therefore by removing your identity, you completely remove most of your sense of control, because you don't know how to interact with the world anymore, and you have no means of positive interaction within the world. And it's the sense of positive interaction within the world that gives you a sense of fulfillment and contentment.
So
you have a loss of control.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, we've talked about sort of control and how to obviously even how to regain control. We've sort of touched on in the past.
But look at how many people signing on unemployed, and the government have the temerity to say that they're following scientific advice without using. Now, the fact is, the government are meant to be there because they know what they're doing. For instance, if whenever I tell a patient that they need to seek legal advice, say they're having a work issue, I emphasize the lawyer is there to give them advice. They don't have to take it. They can use their common sense. Now, the government haven't used any of their common sense. They've just used their pet, on retainer professionals who have been completely wrong, negligently wrong.
I mean,
and they haven't bothered to use their common sense, because that means taking responsibility, which means they may, if they get it wrong, lose their jobs.
Yeah, because it makes me wonder that why would, particularly the UK. I mean, apparently it's been announced. I think it was on the BBC website that it's we've borrowed more money than any other time. For how long? I don't know what it was actually. So we've borrowed all this money to actually sustain this, and I'm thinking, why would governments, particularly around the world, actually put themselves in such an economical strain, or is there another agenda going on here? And as I said, is it I mean, and as I said, there's a lot of these conspiracy theories as though is it a way to actually control people, or is it a way to making them dependent on them, which is a very much a left-wing type thing. We'll give you the welfare, and then obviously once you take that purpose and even significance away, you actually then be able to control them. And
I don't think there's anything to do with the governments. The only conspiracy theory of the governments is they want to stay in power, so that they don't want to appear that they made any mistakes.
Yep.
But of course, if you consider that very carefully, that is a complete lack of integrity, and that always comes out because it's stamped on your forehead. And already people are shouting that the government has been incompetent. And in Spain, they're calling for the resignation of the prime minister and his deputy.
Well, actually, there was something also that happened in Belgium when there was, I think it was the prime minister of Belgium. I don't even know what the title of in Belgium is, or the state leader of Belgium, let's say, went and visited a hospital, and there was this whole parade of people, of staff at the hospital, and as the car was turning, was showing up, everyone turned their back on her.
Good for them.
And so all the state leaders are taking a hit. I mean, it's interesting because everyone, we haven't talked about Donald Trump properly for ages, but he's probably just taking advice as well. But I mean, I don't think he really, he just wants to be re-elected. But
he's saying no lockdown. He's saying no second lockdown, whatever happens.
Yeah,
That's
he has.
said.
Yeah, and he has said, and it is a bold move. But he was talking about injecting himself with disinfectant and things like this, and I don't know whether it was properly articulated or not. But you got to give him something, because he's a very outside the box thinker, which is why I suppose he actually has been so successful, because he's always been a big risk taker. Now. How do you define disinfectant? Because you could even call antibiotics a form of disinfectant. It's there to disinfect you, isn't it?
Correct.
So I really don't know whether the media blew it out or proportion, but
they did. They actually got it completely wrong. He didn't say that anyway. He said something completely different, and they just used their supposed right of free speech to blow it out of all proportion.
I mean, he is taking some medication at the moment, which is being criticised as well, isn't it?
Well, chloroquine, yes. Chloroquine alone apparently has been found to help much. But if you combine it with a couple of things, including an antibiotic, then it apparently does help a bit. So, fair enough.
But he's been criticised for that as well. But I've got to say, he's an interesting character, because he's willing to attempt new things constantly, look for different, very, very different solutions that other people aren't coming up and saying, or whether even if they do hear it, they will not come out and publicly say. He does wear his heart on his sleeve sometimes, and he's actually very transparent in the way of what he says and how he actually says it.
Well, it's the unpredictability and his kind of emotional component that makes people respond to him emotionally, and is part of his strong support base. In other words, as we said before, you can't use logic to access people's emotion, because 98% is an emotional choice. So if you get enough people liking him emotionally, he's going to get his second term.
Oh, I think he's going to get it anyway. I mean, I think the Democrats have got Joe Biden, who, you know, and there's so many holes in his character that they can actually rip that to shreds. Actually, particularly Donald Trump can rip it to shreds, because when he goes for the jugular in terms of another candidate, you know, he's actually very effective, as he did when he actually went for the Republican nomination. Obviously, he actually had to mellow down a little bit when he actually went up against Hillary Clinton, because he could not be coming across as a bully, or so much as a bully. But with Joe Biden, is a totally different matter. He will totally expose him as a weak potential weak leader.
Well, that's right.
So you know, so
wasn't it Obama has said some typically you know, silly things about Trump again. He just raises his head to criticize Trump in a quite typical passive aggressive way that a pussy whipped man would.
Well, Obama's administration is actually, or previous administration is actually under question at the moment in terms of I think, what was his name, Flynn, or something to do with that. If you've actually been following the American type politics, but you know, there'll be I think as the campaign starts heating up, a lot more stuff will actually start coming out about things like that, and how they bugged people and things like this, and the influence the FBI had on looking to prevent Donald Trump getting in last time. So it's an interesting. I mean, look, it's all a game of politics, and
I think the only conspiracy theory that stands any ground in terms of common sense is that the powers that be, and the only power is money, and governments do not control money. It is much, you know, it's much more insidious than that. You know, it's at the level of people like the Rothschilds, even if they still control it. I don't know, but the theory is that it is about establishing a global order. So the Eurozone was that theory, and Francois Mitterrand was involved in that, and he himself said that, you know, I can't force a single European identity, but I can introduce the euro in such a painful way that people's identities will start dissolving, which is exactly what happened. But luckily, in fact, the plucky British stood up for it, didn't they? And then, of course, there's another issue of forming a North American alliance, and then another different alliance to take in part the rest of the world, and again those would be eventually fused as well. So that's probably the only potential conspiracy theory that I can see holds water.
Yeah, because there was talk many years ago. I can't remember what the currency was, but it was to do with a sort of Canadian
and America, yep.
And the something like ELU or EMU, or I can't remember what it was, because they were looking to reduce that. Yeah, because are we going towards a global power? I mean, as I said, it's I find more people or more countries, particularly in Europe, are looking to reclaim their identity now, or there could be a shift, because the EU has exposed themselves as to be fairly incompetent in dealing with this crisis and dealing with the 2008 crisis.
But look, maybe Corona is just a way of resetting everything and destroying the power, because don't forget, crisis is the best forum for change, and this is where each international government needs to grab this opportunity and re-establish strong identity, starting with nationalism, family values, community values, and quite frankly, things like Tinder should be made illegal, because that is an anti-family value and is about instant gratification and not about settling for a proper relationship.
So you say Tinder. I mean, although Tinder, I don't. Was it originally done as to go and search for sex, or was it done to search for relationships?
It was done for money, basically, wasn't it? They want to make money.
Well, of course it does. All dating sites are done there for money.
But Tinder is absolutely the epitome of instant gratification and swipe left, swipe right. And now they want to make it global. So because apparently you can only search nationally, but now they want to make it global as well for some silly reason, probably because